Specifically, we're going to be talking about the perfect system of verbs. This is the second one. So there are two systems of verbs. Each system has three tenses. We have the present system and the perfect system. Now, the present system is what we started with. We had the present tense, where we got amo, I love, or I am loving, I do love. And we got the imperfect, which talks about what we used to do or what we were doing, amabam. And we have the future, which obviously talks about what we shall do. I have will here on the slide. Sometimes that's used. But what we are going to focus on today is what's on the dark side of the slide here, the perfect system. And to understand the perfect tense, you have to understand how we talk about the past in English. In English, we have the simple past tense. It refers to a completed action in a completed time. I did my homework last night. I saw my friend on Saturday. I wrote a poem in the morning. I went to Finland on vacation last year. Well, last night, Saturday, in the morning, and last year, these are all finished periods. And everything you see there in blue is a completed action. That's the simple past tense. When we want to talk about a completed action in an incomplete period, we use something called the present perfect tense. So I've completed my homework. I have seen my friend 3 times this year. This year is not finished. I've written 10 poems so far this week. That isn't finished. The poems are, but the week isn't. I've been to Finland 3 times in my life, and my life hasn't ended yet. So in Latin, we can express both of those tenses, the simple past and the present perfect, with one tense. We use the perfect tense. I did my homework last night. I have done my homework. In English, these are two separate tenses. In Latin, they are just one. So it's kind of like getting a 2-for-1 sale. We're finally catching a break. It's easier to go into Latin this time. So you can celebrate it. Now, to start building the perfect tense, you need to use the third principal part, which is pretty easy to put together, and it's almost always provided for you. Let's say it is characterized by the letter V. It will not always be. It has a unique and new set of endings, and it's used to describe something that one did or has done. So here's our paradigm verb. Amo, amare, amawi. There's the V. Lawo, laware, lawawi. And that is I wash, to wash, and I have washed, or I washed. And by the way, you'll notice that the fourth principal part is being left blank. We don't need it just yet. Porto, portare, portavi is I carry, to carry, I carried or I have carried. Paro is I prepare. Nawigo, of course, is I sail. And naro is I tell. And you can see all of these have that red V in the third principal part. They all end with an I. And that's going to be our gateway to the perfect. It won't always be a V, unfortunately. There are a few exceptions. We have the very important verb sto, which is I stand, sto stare steti. So where we would expect a V, we get a T. And do dare dedi, I give, is do, like donum and donation. So again, where we would expect a V, we got a D. And you'll notice over the second principal part, Dare, there's no macron. That's another peculiarity. And of course, the one that's always going to be irregular is sum esse fui. And fui kind of makes sense if you remember that as a capital letter, U would often be written as a V. So muto, mutare, mutawi. Muto is I change, to change. I have changed. And we have creo and woko. These are words that we've seen before. The first principal part has the O with a macron. The second principal part of the verbs that we've done so far, except for sum, have are. And our third principal part has the V. And I haven't put all of the macrons in for now. I'm just focusing on the consonants more. So we take away the third principal part, and that's what we're going to use to build with. And here's this new set of endings. So we have wokawi, wokawisti, wokawit, wokawimus, wokawistis, and wokawerunt. And some of these are pretty easy to identify because they look like other forms that we've used. Okay, so wokawi, I called or I have called. And again, in English, these would be two completely different things. It doesn't matter in Latin. So that's what the perfect tense looks like for a regular verb. Amawi, amawisti, amawit, amawimus, amawitis, amawerunt. Now let's see what happens if we want to use the irregular sum. And I'm switching back and forth here between Amawi and Wokawi. So now we have Wokawi, right? I called or I have called. And if we bring sum into the picture, we're going to follow the same pattern, except we're going to swap out that V for a U. So there are your perfect endings, right? We, wisti, wit, wimus, wistis, werunt. And we bring the third principal part from sum, which is fui, I was or I have been. And you can see that, again, if you remember that U and V are really the same letter, we have the same endings. So fui, fuisti, fuit, fuimus, fuistis, fuerunt, I was or I have been. Okay, again, the English is the same. We're getting two tenses here for the price of one. And the endings are the same. So even though sum is a highly irregular verb, we can kind of predict how this one should conjugate. Now you might be wondering, well, wait a minute, what about eram? Because eram, we learned, is sum in the imperfect. The difference is not important now. Eram is basically I was being or I used to be, where fui is I was or I have been. And for a while now, we'll be able to just use these as I was, and we'll know from context if anything else works. If I say Magnus eram, I used to be great. Magnus fui, I was great. As if to say, like that one time, I was great in that play.